let's start big. Why is ninth grade such a pivotal moment in the student's academic life?
Ninth graders are going through a lot of transitions. They're moving from middle school into high school. All of a sudden, their grades are more important than they've been before. They've never been held back for not passing the class. And they're given a lot of responsibility. They're no longer being walked from one class to another. All of a sudden, they've got 4 to 8 teachers that they're going to visit. So we know that it's going to be a difficult time for them. But in addition to that, University of Chicago has been doing a lot of research in terms of ninth grade, in terms of graduation rates. And we see that ninth grade core passage rates are the #1 indicator for whether a student will graduate. It's big.
Yeah, absolutely. So what is one of the biggest risks to these students' success?
We could list out all of the external forces that they're experiencing every day, but internally, one of the big things as a teacher that I see is teacher burnout. Once you're burnt out, you're no longer fully there for the students. And so it becomes difficult to support students, especially ninth graders, in all of the ways that they need it.
Yeah. Why does burnout impact students so directly?
It has to do with teachers' ability to create relationships with their students, their ability to be present in the moment and to provide the energy to the room that the students need in order to be engaged with the content.
Yeah. And is there anything that school can do, or really what helps prevent burnout?
Collaboration. Collaboration's huge, especially in traditional schools where every teacher has their own classroom and they don't necessarily have to leave that space. They don't have to run into other teachers. It can be very isolating, and you can feel like you're the only person dealing with all of the stresses of all 150 students that you're working with.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And so when we're talking about collaboration, how does that actually impact teacher motivation, teacher engagement? So we're going down that route.
When teachers have the opportunity to communicate with one another, it can be a social, emotional, just being able to express what's happening in their classrooms and knowing that they're not alone in those experiences. That's huge. But collaboration can be between teachers, it can be between teachers, social workers, teachers and counselors, teachers in the health clinic. All of a sudden, teachers have significantly more resources that they can use once they're actively working together with other people. And then just with other teachers, if you can communicate with the students' other teachers, then you're more likely to catch what's going on with the student. You're more likely to be able to support them with whatever they're going through.
Yeah, it sounds like the more data collected, you actually have a better idea to analyze what's going on.
Yeah, one person can't do all of that.
Yeah, and the benefits you just highlighted, does this extend beyond teachers?
It extends to the students. I think I mentioned it briefly. Research is showing that students whose teachers experience burnout, experience that burnout vicariously through them. If a teacher is burnt out, then they're not present. Like I said, they're not putting their energy into building the relationships with the students because they're too busy trying to protect their own selves, their own beings. So student outcomes actually are negatively affected by teacher burnout. We've got empirical evidence for that.
I'm sure you do. And nailing down with this, the collaboration between either teacher to teacher or teacher to social worker, like you were saying, can you give an example of what that looks like in practice?
Yeah, so University of Chicago has been doing a lot of research in this area, and they've been working with Chicago Public Schools to develop what they're calling student success teams. The idea there is that students, any single student, will have the same English, science, math teacher as their peers in the classroom, which means as a teacher, I know that my students are seeing me and they're seeing those two other core teachers in their classroom. So I have the ability to talk to just two people instead of talking to everyone in the building or spending the time trying to figure out who the sports are for the students.
Yeah, I like that. And so this research that you were just talking about, thankfully I had a moment to look at it ahead of time. It really highlights how GPA and not test scores are one of the most impactful predictors of graduation. Why is that the case? And what does GPA capture that test scores don't?
Well, as we know, test scores are not a reflection of you as a human being. They're merely a snapshot of that hour that you spent in that room. But they really are. Some people are not good test takers, and regardless of how good you are at taking tests, it's not going to be a full expression of who that student is and what that student is capable of, and neither is GPA. But GPA is a number, it's a solid thing that's going to follow a student through their entire 4 years and their next educational goals once they have it. So when a student sees a negative score, when a student sees a failing grade on their transcript, it's really demoralizing for them. It's really hard for students to dig themselves out of the holes once they've found themselves in the holes. So not only do those grades follow them, not only do those grades have a larger effect than passing grades, a larger impact on students mentally, but then students have to make them up. Core courses are required, which means if a student doesn't pass Algebra 1 during their 9th grade year, they're taking Algebra 1 then during their sophomore year, which means they're a sophomore in with a bunch of freshmen, and nobody likes that. Or they're taking summer school. So it really does hold them back more than core courses. Failures in core courses holds them back more than failure in other courses.
Yeah. And trying to conceptualize this on my end, can you walk us through a real moment or turning point where success teams actually change the trajectory of a student or maybe a student body?
Yeah. We had a student who came in wanting everything. She was going to get all A's. She set her SMART goals. They were all top of the class, valedictorian. And as we experienced having this student in the classroom with us, she wasn't paying attention all the time. She had her phone out, she was having side conversations, she would leave for more than 5 minutes at a time and miss big chunks of a class period. And we discussed this student before. We'd seen that her attendance and her grades were slipping because we look at data for students. We knew what her goals were, so we knew she had at least the desire to not be slipping in that way. So we ended up bringing her into one of our meetings, which is a lot for a 9th grader to sit in a room with all of their core teachers, sometimes also a counselor or an administrator. And we went through a process with her where we shared our what she's doing well, what she's struggling with, asking her to share those things as well, and try to come up with a plan for what was going on and what she needed to do. And having that interaction with her teachers made it so that when she was back in the classroom and she pulled out her phone, we knew how she wanted us to react. So we were able to come up to her and approach her in ways that were comfortable for her, to remind her to put her phone away. And she knew that there was that expectation, not just, oh, the teacher's telling me to put my phone away again, but we have this same goal that she has now, and she knows it. And so she knows when we're asking her to put that phone away, that we're asking for her, so that she can reach those goals. And she ended up passing all of her core classes by the end of that semester, or that year, which was lovely. My favorite one, though, we had a student who was just off the walls, exuberant, so much energy. He was in and out of the classroom, couldn't keep him in the room. And the policy is to call campus security when a student just disappears. Mm-hmm. So we were constantly having to call campus security, which is always hard as a teacher. And he wasn't passing any of his core classes by the time we brought him in. So technically he wasn't supposed to be a student who was part of the student success team, but he was a student that we all cared very much about.
Yeah, you still want to see the success of.
Exactly. So again, we pulled this student into one of our conversations, and the experience of having all of his teachers tell him something that he was doing well was something he had never had before. Mm-hmm. And the change in how he reacted and behaved in my classroom was stark. He did not pass all of his core classes, and I don't know that he graduated on time ultimately, but he came back to my classroom every semester to check in and would tell me how life was going and would tell me what was happening and how classes were going and would ask me questions. I'd go to some of his teachers in junior year. I went with him to visit his science teacher just so that he had somebody on his side when he went to ask questions and figure out what he could do for his grade. So I know that it affected him as a person, which was really good.
Yeah, I mean, just in that story, you can tell the impact it has. And impact it has on you.
Yeah.
Where Stoke and having that memory is just, it's evident.
Yeah.
And, well, what are some of the hidden signals that educators such as yourself should be looking for in that first year of high school? Before grades drop or the attendance falters, before any of this really needs to go in place?
Right. Ninth grade is a huge transition for students. So as a ninth grade teacher, it's really important to go into your interactions with your students without expectations of failure. It's really easy to look at grades from 8th grade or attendance from 8th grade and start making assumptions about which students are going to fail and which students are going to succeed. But the minute you set that precedent, the minute you have that in your head, it's more likely to happen, right? Yeah. So the thing that we would look at just to figure out on day one which students we wanted to make sure got their first assignment in was their attendance actually for 8th grade. Because 8th grade attendance is the number one indicator for how they'll do 9th grade year, and then of course 9th grade grades are the number one indicator for whether they'll graduate. So we did have like a list of students, but just to make sure we were checking in with them. We tried really hard to not go in with those expectations. Another thing we do is we actually try to make sure that we're doing interventions immediately. So you said before, assignments and attendance can be affected, but we make sure that in the first week of classes, every teacher on that student success team has assigned and collected something. So that students, and it's got to be a really straightforward, just to show them that they can do an assignment, they can turn it in, and they can see that show up in their grades. Mm-hmm. And so we make sure that every student finds success with that first assignment. Sometimes it's a getting to know you thing, sometimes it's academic focused, but
yeah, it sounds like it just builds that momentum and for students. It seems that much easier to capture.
Yeah.
I really like it.
Yeah.
So is there anything that we didn't touch on or something that we did touch on that you want to expand on more? I love this example because it just sort of points to how we need and how we should be showing up for each other this isn't the example of school, but it could be the workplace. So is there anything that is going on up in your head that you wanted to share?
Well, it's interesting that you say that because a lot of the research on collaboration is actually within healthcare or in the social work realm of things. There's very little research about how collaboration affects teachers and how collaboration affects teacher collaboration affects students. That's been going on. I think one of the studies I looked at was 2021, one was 2023. So we're talking just recently, we're starting to actually try and get some quantitative data in this area.
Yeah.
And that quantitative data is showing us what I'm explaining. The teachers who are supported within a team, who can talk to their teammates about what they're experiencing in their classroom, who can look at a single student's progress and grades and attendance and what's worked and what hasn't, are able to come up with some sort of plan. And having a plan is huge, because it means you step into that classroom and you know that something different is going to happen that day, so that hopefully some change can happen that day.
Yeah. And we started this topic a little bit on burnout for a teacher.
Yeah.
And we got to student success teams and the effect of a student. So it's really, I wanted to drive home this point too, that it sounds like it's also freeing up time, mental space, and the teacher's capacity to keep going and their own happiness in their job. So does that feel correct for you as well?
Absolutely. Yes. I'm not sure how we would have made it through the pandemic without our success teams. Yeah. Having the support of another teacher, knowing that you're not the only person dealing with what's happening in your classroom, having a weekly interaction with an administrator, because they're required to come to meetings once a week, having that weekly meeting with them so that you know that your message is getting to them, and having someone facilitating so that you know that if a student needs Title 10 is housing. So that we know that students are getting the services they need, they're getting the healthcare they need, they're getting the housing they need. It takes a huge load off the individual teacher. It means that they can be the teacher and not also the social worker and the counselor and the parent and the healthcare provider and the delivery system.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
There's so much overlap to this and what happens in the workplace as well. And that was one part that I just wanted for you to share out and speak to, so I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, let's call it there.
Awesome.